This is the City of San Marino Planning Commission, oh, I don't. What are you looking for? I just want to know if we do roll call before I do my preamble or not. I'm just going to go ahead and give a brief introduction about how we operate. So the general order of business will be for each item on the agenda. We will hear a report from staff. We will then hear from the applicant or the applicant's representative, and then we will have a discussion amongst ourselves. I interject in there, we'll have public hearing. And then when public hearings are finished, we will then have a discussion amongst ourselves, and the public hearing will be closed at that time. The agenda has been posted. The agenda for this meeting has been posted 72 hours prior to the meeting at the City of San Marino Recreation Department, at the City Hall, and on the city's website. Any decisions that are made this evening on an item are appealable within 15 days of this meeting. It's important for any applicant to understand that should an approval be given for a project, once that approval is given, no changes can be made to the project under penalty of various fines, which I'll leave to the city to explain if somebody wants to look into that. Because the approval does make the agreement for your project a legal document. Have I covered everything? Okay. So with that, could we have a roll call, please? I'm sorry? Oh, yes, let's stand for the flag. I forgot, we're in person. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could we have a roll call for the commissioners, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Alternate Commissioner Ogasaki.
Here.
Commissioner Wright.
Here.
Thank you, Ansu. Commissioner Chang.
Present.
Commissioner Brody.
Present.
Vice Chair Boyle.
Here.
Chair Dustin.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we will get started with this very brief agenda with the first item, conditional use permit CUP 21-01 at 2347 Huntington Drive. If we could have the staff report, please.
Sure. Conditional use permit 21-01 is a request to operate an antique store at 2347 Huntington Drive to sell home decorations, arts and crafts, in an approximately 830 square foot unit in an existing 2,500 square foot multi-tenant commercial building. This is a correction from the staff report, which mentioned that the space was approximately 740 square feet. This does not change the parking requirement for the space, however. The proposed use would not require additional parking based on section 23.10.03A of the municipal code. Staff is able to make the required findings to grant a conditional use permit with added conditions to ensure that the operation of the antique store is not detrimental to the health, safety, peace, morals, comfort, or general welfare of neighboring residents. That concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff from the commission?
I have one.
Go ahead.
I found it interesting that one of the conditional or one of the conditions for approval is that everything needs to be recorded for the police to be able to check on, on items or whatever. And I just, is this something that I've missed in the past, or is this something that is it unique to this particular business? And if so, why?
This is unique to this particular business. In my recollection and staff's general recollection, this is the first antique store we've had in San Marino. This is something we saw in many neighboring cities. Codes related to secondhand stores and antique stores. This is for the purpose of aiding the San Marino Police Department and the possibility of any stolen items. This is specific to, as mentioned in the condition, for serialized secondhand goods, precious metals, or jewelry specifically.
So in this case, if I understand correctly, it's because if for some reason the owner of the business has gotten a piece of jewelry that has been stolen, for the police to understand, not if the business itself gets stolen.
Correct.
Okay.
Can
Thank
you, I'm sorry, I have a quick follow-up question. Can you explain what a serialized secondhand good is?
The first thing that comes to mind would be audio-visual equipment, things like guitars, amplifiers, things like that usually
Like
have
with a serial
numbers.
Ah,
Yes.
perfect. Thank you.
I have a question too,
Sure.
Commissioner Wright, sorry. It involves the enforcement of those conditions. Most of them talk about prior to using the property, as an antique store. I think that's kind of difficult. Although I guess small community, we drive around and can see. But is this antique store required to get a certificate of occupancy?
Aldo, would you be able to clarify that? To my knowledge, they would not, because it's not necessarily a change of occupancy.
Yeah, when we reference the change of occupant or the certificate of occupancy is required for any new business, and that's really just ensuring that the property is, or the unit is inspected to ensure that there's safety elements that are taken care of. Fire extinguishers are installed. The unit is fully furnished for accessibility purposes. That's what gets checked during the certificate of occupancy related to the business license.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
Did you actually verify that the spaces that you saw behind the garage, behind the building, off the alley, were valid parking spaces? I saw 10 wheel stoppers, but I did not see any striping there. And what I did see, imagining the stripes were there, I could not visualize 10 spaces. I could visualize 5, but the other side, because it's on a slope and it's so narrow that I am not certain if 10 spaces meet the city requirement. So
I can't confirm. I can't confirm that the existing spaces meet current parking requirements as far as the size of the parking spaces and the backup radius or backup radius. But there were as the site currently stands, there are 10 parking spaces there, and because the proposed use is for within an existing building, we review this site as is. There's no requirement for providing additional parking to what's there now, as the site was approved.
Anyway, the striping is totally invisible. So, like I said, you have to imagine that the parking stalls are consistent with the stoppers, but it's not physically there. So I couldn't imagine all 10 spaces myself. Okay.
Any other questions from the commission? All right, then with that, I'd like to ask if the applicant or the applicant's representative is available to present their project.
It looks like they're on Zoom. If you could unmute yourself. If the applicant is there, if you could please unmute yourself.
He doesn't speak English, so.
你说吧。
Would you be able to assist him if possible?
Maybe, not sure. He said he doesn't really have anything to say.
So you'll just stand on the paperwork that's been submitted, is that correct?
那他们直接用那个纸
Okay.
对吗
Okay. He said okay.
He said okay.
All right, thank you. Well, with that, I'll ask if any of the members of the commission have questions for the applicant or the applicant's representative.
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
I'm just curious on the business plan that was submitted. It says that the antique items age will be a combination of over 100 years old and under 100 years old. And I just would like some clarity on that, because depending on how under 100 years old is, it is no longer an antique. And so I want to understand more about what the goods will be, what kind of goods will be sold there in terms of their age.
有个问题，你的纸说你的古董是说比100年，有些比100年大，有些比100年少。他问你有多少比100年少，但是如果太少的话呢，不能算古董。
你说一般都是在苏斯比 Christie 拍卖买的，有100年前的也有，一般都是清100年前以前的，苏斯比。
多少？多那什么？
不确定。
He said most of them he got them from like I don't know how to pronounce that in English, but from a different antique store, and most of them are under 100, but he isn't sure just how much.
主要是在苏斯比和 Christie 拍卖行买。
Oh, he said most of them from Sotheby's 还有 Christie's antique store. So, yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question too, please, Commissioner Wright. I'm just wondering how many employees are going to be on site, thinking of the parking, and if I missed it, I'm sorry, but I didn't see that.
他问多少个 employee 就是工人，不是工人就是
工作人员是吧？
工作人员会在那个
店里是吧？
然后呢
two people.
He doesn't really understand my translation. He said 2 people for the whole store, so it's sort of weird.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, with that, I'm going to open up the public hearing, and I'll ask if there are any comments from the public for, against, or about this proposal.
No one on Zoom.
Thank you. I'm going to close the public hearing on this portion of the agenda. I'll start the discussion with within the commission. I'll ask Commissioner Wright for your comments.
Throwing me in the deep end after I've been gone, huh? Well, I could support this. I think we need businesses. It's something we don't have a lot of. I'm thinking about Vice Chair's question, though, and I guess time will tell about the quality of the merchandise being sold. And of course, as we know in San Marino, businesses don't always make it. It's sad to say, but I think this is one that certainly fits within our community as far as land use impacts. I think the conditions are reasonably related to the proposed impact. So of course I support that, but I would recommend that they be changed to say prior to issuance of the certificate of occupancy to trigger any of those conditions, because it's just a little bit easier to enforce that we would have a trigger to check that the conditions have been satisfied.
Thank you. Vice Chair Boyle.
Well, unfortunately, I don't feel I can support this and would like to hear what the other commissioners have to say other than Jerry. Commissioner Wright, thank you for your input. These are where my concerns are. Obviously, I fully support businesses coming onto Huntington Drive, and I think an antique store is not out of the realm of possibility for San Marino. My concerns have stemmed from doing a little bit of digging, as I normally do, and per the Secretary of State filing, they actually are listed as a trading company, and that is not what an antique store is typically listed as. It's listed as retail. I think that the nuance of just not really understanding the kind of products that will be there with this general 100 years older, 100 years younger, that's everything. That isn't antique. And I hate to sound suspicious, but it just seems to me that there's the potential of this being more akin to a secondhand store, potentially a pawn store, a pawn, what do you call it? Pawn shop. Pawn shop. And I don't know why, except that the trading aspect being registered with the Secretary of State was the one trigger for me, because pawn shops are considered trade shops as opposed to an antique store is considered a retail shop. So that's kind of where my hesitancy is.
Can I ask?
Like
I'm sorry. Can I ask you if there's some kind of condition that would satisfy that concern? Because that's a reasonable concern.
I don't know if there would be a condition. I mean, and the only reason I say that is because, I mean, if it's registered with the Secretary of State, can we put as a trading company? I mean, can any of our conditions?
So,
well, they've told us it's an antique store.
Yeah, I would just add that, or to your comment and your concern. You know, I don't know, aside from Mr. Brody here being the attorney, you know, and Jerry to see what the business is and how it's licensed, how it operates. You know, it does state in their business plan they take items on consignment. So effectively, that's what pawn shops do as well. So, I mean, you know, but that's typical of an antique store to take items on consignment, and as well as used car shops, they take vehicles on consignment as well. So to say if you were to restrict anyone that took items on consignment or what you define as trade as something that's not allowable, that you'd be excluding a lot of business.
No, I'm not. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I'm not opposed to something being on consignment. Like I know that the staff said that we don't have any antique stores here, but I know that Lexington Place is an antique store that's been in the town for 30 years on Mission.
So what is I guess my question then, what is the concern? What is the concern that they would be operating, doing business?
Because if they're operating as a pawn shop, I don't think that a pawn shop is consistent with San Marino.
Right. So
and the thing is that antiques, as I said, antique stores are registered as retail,
right? And
car stores are probably registered as retail or whatever. And other items like flea markets and that kind of stuff is more, they are categorized by the Secretary of State as a trading company. And so that nuance is just something that in my research was something that just, again, I'm just bringing it up as a point of concern, and I'm very happy to listen. I really do want to listen to what all the other commissioners said. That was just, that small little nuance was something that raised a small red flag for me. And so thank you for my time, for letting me speak.
Kevin, since you commenting, will you give us your comments next?
I mean, I don't think it's a front from what we can see, what they propose. It's not a front to conduct some type of illicit business, or even if it is, if they do take items on consignment that are goods of,
a antique nature, that doesn't make that, and you could characterize that as a pawn shop, I guess, or, you know, typically a pawn store, they offer items and the actual business owner gives them X amount of money, the dollars, and then until they pay it off, they will hold it. And if they don't pay it off in a certain amount of time, then the pawn shop can go sell those items and recoup their loan. So, but I don't know per the California code what a trading company specifies. I mean, it could be just pawn stores or trading companies, or there could be a whole slew of companies that are defined as trading companies, which conduct businesses that would fall under the conditional use permit that we're being asked to allow for. So I don't know, we don't have city legal on the line to refer to see what the code says specific to California trading companies and what businesses they can or can't operate, right? Or do we even have purview as far as what a business owner, I mean, all it says that I saw in there, not going to the state to search, but it says Chen Shao Inc. is a S Corp incorporated in the state of California. So for all intents and purposes, it's a corporation incorporated by the Secretary of State.
Kevin, Commissioner Chang, I'm not trying to be antagonistic or anything. I support businesses coming into this area.
No, I understand. I guess what I'm trying to understand is what is the concern? What is, because
as I explained, and I'm not saying that this is an illicit or a front for some illicit business. Right. What I'm saying is that I think that the specificity of calling it a trading company, and in my research, trading companies tend to be things like pawn shops as opposed to a retail store. The trading companies are also flea markets and swap meets and that kind of thing. That I just am bringing up the question that if indeed it does turn out to be more similar to a pawn shop by, you know, them bringing in a watch that's 5 years old, that's not an antique store. And is that consistent with what we want in the city? It's just a question. And I'm happy to be the lone no, if that's how I feel. You know, it's just something that I wanted to, I mean, the commission is here as, you know, colleagues to discuss our concerns, and I have the right to bring that up. And
so, unfortunately, I guess the unfortunate thing is the applicant can't communicate,
right?
And it sounds like they have somebody with them who
can't communicate.
It's not.
Not fully communicate. So, I mean, I could try my best to ask the question and try to get an answer from the.
Can I just throw out a couple of thoughts?
Sure.
Number one, you can't just open a pawn shop.
Excuse me, if you wouldn't mind speaking into the mic so the people on Zoom can hear as well.
You can't just open a pawn shop. It requires licensure with the city.
Right.
And with
the city and okay.
State. So I don't see that as a potential. I think the resolution to this would be to impose a condition that the sole function of this particular business entity is to sell antiques and collectibles. And that would resolve any other issues that may come up or doubt about the veracity of what the business is.
I mean, Commissioner Brody, if you are saying to me that a pawn shop cannot open unless there is licensure, you know, and correct permits and all of that, that appeases my concerns. I just didn't, again, I'm just bringing up an area that was slightly nuanced for me.
Yeah.
And hence the reason we're having this discussion.
Yeah, I have no problem with you doing that. And that's great that you are, in all frankness. So I could support it with that condition, that the sole function of this particular business will be the selling of antiques and collectibles.
Commissioner Okazaki.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with this request. I have seen the so-called antique stores like this in the San Gabriel Valley in Pasadena. As a customer, I buy antique furniture, and the fact that he might be registered as a trading company is because he might be importing stuff from Asia. I know that the stuff that I have bought come from Asia, and it's aged, not in America, aged in a foreign country, China, particularly, or Japan that comes here. And I believe those are the kind of items that are going to be sold here, similar to the other Asian antique shops that I've seen and I patronize in the San Gabriel Valley. Okay, it's not a pawn shop of any kind, but I'm glad that you pointed that out, Howard, because I think in LA, the pawn shop require LAPD approval.
Yeah.
They require inspection as well. So it's not just a approval process by the police commission. They actually get inspected on a regular and consistent basis. So I don't think we have a problem here.
Yeah, I have a few things to say. Again, I think everyone on the commission is supportive of bringing in new business. We really need it in town. I do share some concerns about this issue of especially now to hear from the applicant that the majority of the items that they are planning on selling are less than 100 years old. I don't know what the definition of an antique is. I think it's 75 years, but I'm not sure. But when I look at the code, there are 3 types of businesses that this establishment could fall under, and the code handles them very differently. Retail establishments sell new merchandise. They are permitted at will with no conditional use permit required. Antique stores must, by our code, sell only items that are over 100 years of age, and they require a conditional use permit. Secondhand stores are specifically prohibited by the code with or without a conditional use permit. They are not allowed. So my concern always is not this particular business. It's protecting our procedures and our processes. And we need to be very careful that we don't approve a business that is, from what I'm seeing here now, more appears to be potentially a secondhand store. That opens us up to some risk, I believe. I don't know. I'd like to hear the commission's thoughts on that.
So I think in my limited Chinese, I could ask the applicant the question: are you selling goods over 100 years, or are you selling secondhand goods?
He answered that.
He answered it.
He said the majority of items will be less than 100 years.
When I was listening to the volunteer translator,
yeah,
they didn't understand his response. He didn't ask he didn't direct the question to him appropriately,
okay,
and he didn't respond accordingly.
Well, let's try that.
Why don't you try it and also ask if you could?
So is the applicant still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Great. Okay. I'm going to try to ask my question, and then you can try to answer, or the applicant can answer as well. So 他们想问你卖的东西呢是二手呢，可是是那个古董的东西，他们是要知道不会是二手的东西，一定是古董的东西。
那个主要是在苏斯比
跟 Christie 我懂。所以你买的东西，你的东西，你的货是在 Christie 跟 Sotheby 买的。
邦汉斯买的，然后主要在这里做展览呢，然后文化展示中国文化，你跟他讲，你讲一下。
会你的东西会不会出过每个东西会不会出过100年？的东西是
有过100年的，
每一个都是，
不是每一个都是，
大部分都是比
大部分都是，
大部分是100年以上，小部分46吧，就是说46或者37， 100年以上的7，100年以下的3。
So he just stated 70% would be over 100 years old. And there's 30% that would be less than 100 years old.
Yes.
He doesn't say they're new.
He said he procures from Christie's and Sotheby's and internationally to resell here.
He's trying to get an old one, but he can't guarantee the age.
Right.
He doesn't know for sure.
Right.
Well, unless he's procured it from an auction house that has records. But to to satisfy what the questions and concerns are,
Right.
it's not 100. So if you're going, when I read what the requirements are, it says in order to issue it, there has to be items that are sold that are over 100 years old. Not every single item has to be over 100 years old to qualify. And that's what I read on page, what was it?
It says exclusively over 100 years. That to me
On
100%.
For issuance of the cup. Again, I'm just,
Yeah, well, it says
when I
it
read
says an antique store which exclusively sells things that are over 100 years old is eligible to request a CUP.
right.
So my interpretation of that is if they're not selling 100 exclusively over the age of 100 years, then do they run the risk of being defined as a secondhand store? And is that putting us at some jeopardy because now someone else can come along with a request to open up a.
So I guess, can we ask staff, is that a prerequisite that if a store is holding themselves out as an antique store, every item in the store needs to be over 100 years old?
So staff's interpretation was that the conditional use permit was required to sell antique items over 100 years old.
Okay.
Our interpretation was that selling an item from, say, the mid-century period from the 50s and 60s would not meet that requirement. However, would still be classified as an antique. However, that would be considered retail and so be by right use.
Okay.
However, to sell items over than 100 years would require the conditional use permit.
That satisfies my concern. Perfect.
So if I were to respond back to the applicant, every item that they sell would have to be over 100 years old for the conditional use permit to be issued.
I'm sorry, could you rephrase that? I didn't quite understand.
That's not what I heard.
No.
What I heard was, if he's gonna sell any item over 100 years old.
They need
he
a
has to get
CUP.
Right. So
That's not the way to put it.
So he needs to get a permission to sell
Items over, right.
items that are over 100. Anything less than 100, he doesn't need the CUP.
Got it.
I'm curious for staff. Could you tell me then what the definition of a second-hand store is?
It's not defined in the code.
So, because I look at the pictures in the business plan, those pictures look like the same pictures that are on the website for the Huntington collection, which is a second-hand store, or the Goodwill store. I mean, you can find those kinds of items on the shelves there. So I'm just kind of,
They might look like it, but the ones that are sold are.
But I'm not concerned. I'm not concerned with what it is. I'm concerned with what it looks like, because the next person that comes along to open up a business and it's not something that we want, how do we say no? Because now they can look at this and say, well, these people are doing exactly what we're doing.
Why don't we have a condition?
Chair, if I may, Chair, why don't we consider a continuance to the next planning commission? What that will do is allow us to consult with our attorneys and our legal team to determine the exclusive piece of the language and determine whether this is in fact meeting the intent of the law or the code or not. And if it doesn't, then we have to take a different approach. But if it does, and the CUP, of course, is still going to be required, but at least we'll have some clarity and some additional facts for the planning commission to consider this application.
That's a possibility, but Commissioner Brody had a suggestion on a condition. I just wanted to hear it.
Yeah, and
Sure.
I'm assuming that.
Put the mic closer.
I'm assuming that the issue is that their primary business, and this is what I gather from the reading of that, is the selling of antiques, which is items over 100 years old. And that would constitute, according to the gentleman's own statement here, the majority of all sales. And I think that condition probably would solve the issue. But with regard to what the planning director stated, I guess we could, have it gone over by the city attorney. Although if the primary objective and the sales of antiques over 100 years old is what these folks do, I don't see where we have any problem with it, because it sounds like it's like every high-end antique store that I've ever run into.
Yeah.
Where most of the stuff is over 100 years old. And then there are some mid-century modern, unique crafts that are definite collectible, and they're thrown into the mix.
I get, oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Brady.
So that's the only thing I'd suggest, is that would be an alternative to turning it over to the city attorney's office.
Vice Chair?
I mean, I guess it's just the question that does keep coming up in my mind is, let's say they do have something that's vintage and not antique, like a mid-century modern something or other, because we don't have a definition of secondhand. I don't know if the 25% are now considered secondhand goods. And since our code doesn't allow for that, does it set precedent for, you know, something coming in? So as much as I don't want to continue this, I do wish that we had a little bit more guidance on the definition of secondhand.
I got a question for Director Cervantes. Would it be possible to make that a condition, that we would approve the CUP with the condition that city staff would consult with the city attorney first to get a decision on whether or not this is going to be a conflict with our ordinance and potentially set the city up for some future concern? And if the city attorney approves, then the approval is okay. Is that a doable condition?
I would recommend a continuance, not an approval with a condition, because it's best to have the facts in order before a decision is made.
Thank you.
So, and I would also like perhaps a better way to understand the applicant, to have the applicant a little more prepared to answer our questions.
Do I have a motion?
I move to continue conditional use permit number CUP 21-01.
August.
Oh, I'm sorry, to the August 25th meeting.
Second.
Could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Wright?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
No.
Commissioner Brody?
No.
Vice Chair Boyle?
Yes.
Chair Dustin?
Yes.
Motion carried.
And could we ask staff to work with the applicant to make sure that they're able to respond to questions at the August meeting? Thank
Absolutely.
Let's move on to the next item. This is appeal of determination of a tree removal permit at 1470 Lorraine Road. Staff report, please.
Hey, thank you, Chair and members of the Planning Commission. This item is a request for an appeal of a denial from our urban forester to remove 2 pittosporum trees located in the rear yard of 1470 Lorraine Road. The urban forester did approve or authorize the removal of 3 other pittosporum trees, but 2 of the trees did not meet the findings under the code for the allowance of the removal of the trees. In fact, the urban forester, and later confirmed by myself on inspection, found no issues, no health issues related to the 2 trees that remain, as well as the urban forester finding that both trees are in health or good health, as well as in good structural stability. And so that being said, given the report that was performed by our urban forester, both in the form of a physical inspection, as well as a hazards form that's attached to the report, my visual inspection finding no issues to remove these 2 trees. I cannot agree with the applicant that the 2 trees remaining should be removed. The applicant did address concerns about cracking of the nearby adjacent wall. There are images that show cracking along the grout lines of this wall. That, in my experience, could be really any type of condition. This wall is retaining in nature, and as a retaining wall could succumb to settling, which could also result in cracking of the wall. And so to blame the trees or the row of trees on the cracking of the wall is, I think, reaching a conclusion that I, based off the information that's been submitted, cannot reach that similar conclusion. So if the applicant is claiming that said trees are damaging structures, I do not have any evidence to come to that conclusion to date. And so because of the lack of evidence, staff is recommending the Planning Commission continue this matter to the August 25th hearing to allow the appellant the ability of providing additional arborist reports, as well as reports by licensed contractors to identify the unforeseen impacts of these two remaining trees. And that concludes the presentation. I open for questions.
Are there any questions for staff from the commissioner? Okay, then if the, oh yes, please go ahead, Commissioner Okazaki.
I went there, but I don't want to go in the backyard. How can we take a look at it to verify when we get sick for ourselves? Can we knock on the door and get permission for the owner to go back there, or do you need to contact them beforehand to do that?
The problem is that the cracking on the wall is not on the owner's, on the applicant's property. It's on the neighbors to the rear.
That's correct.
So how do we?
I don't know that we are guaranteed that ability.
Yeah, that's certainly the issue, and I certainly had that same issue visiting the site. No one was home during my inspection, but I was able to gain access from a neighboring property who did provide me permission to access their lot. I did have a good vantage point from this adjacent property to look at the two trees that are in question. The cracking of the wall is on the adjacent neighboring side and not visible from the subject side. But as I stated earlier, cracking of walls along the grout line, especially on a very old wall, could be unrelated to the situation related to the trees, and more so related to the fact that it's a retaining wall. There potentially could be lack of structural stability or rebar inside these walls, which could be another factor of the cracking, as well as settling of the wall. I just plainly do not have any evidence in front of me given to date by the applicant that allows me to make a determination that these trees are in fact the lead cause of structural damage to any nearby structures. I just don't have that, and because I don't have the evidence, I cannot meet the finding as identified in the code for hazardous conditions.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, then I'd like to ask the applicant or the applicant's representative to please state their position.
Excuse me, sorry. If you could turn the mic on.
Yeah, despite the recommendation from the staff report, I hope that conditions beyond the trees being hazardous or a threat to the public can be considered, which I was told so by the urban forester. As stated in my appeal letter, point number 1, 2, 3, and 5, my concerns are, firstly, the second story of my neighbor's structure is right up against the property line, and existing trees provide zero privacy over my entire backyard and my master bedroom. The replacement trees, as shown in the landscape plan, will provide adequate privacy. Secondly, due to the close proximity, extraction of roots of the approved trees can damage the roots of remaining trees and hence adversely affect their health conditions. Replacing the entire groups of trees in the same species will provide uniform look and care. Lastly, the tree canopies are shading a big part of my backyard, which results in difficulty in growing lawn and other plants. As a result, a large part of my backyard is nothing else but dirt currently. The proposed landscape plan will cover the currently shaded area with lawn and plants, which they will rely heavily on sunshine and not being shaded. I think the landscape plan will fix my concerns, beautify my backyard, and have more trees than before. And I hope the commission can find my concerns and use cases as homeowner valid and approve the removal of the 2 remaining trees. Thank you.
Then I'm going to open this item up for a public hearing. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak for, against, or about this proposal or this appeal? Thank you. I'm going to close the public comment period of this item, and we'll go into commission deliberations. Commissioner Brody.
The Pittosporum is a very dirty tree, and its positioning here is of great concern up against an existing structure. I frankly think that the landscaping plan that was proposed was a far better solution. And, you know, the fact that someone had an idea way back when of just slapping up more than a couple of Pittosporum trees against a structure. I don't know why we are hanging on to that as something untouchable. I'm inclined to approve the appeal, but I'd like to hear from my fellow commissioner.
Thank you. Commissioner Wright.
Well, I've struggled with this one because of the condition that the staff needs to make, that it's a hazardous condition or a threat to the public. So if we're going to go that route, I would support a continuance as long as the appellant is willing to provide us that information to see if it really is a hazardous condition. But I share Commissioner Brody's view as well. I have a lot of concerns about this, a rear yard property. I've always sort of struggled with our governmental interest in regulating trees in the rear yards that you can't see from the public right of way. To me, that's that's really close. And here with a landscape plan, that if it were part of a project, they were remodeling or a new house and they were able to get an approved landscape plan, boom, we'd approve it and let those trees go. So I'm kind of concerned about that. That's a little bit inconsistent on the way we are regulating trees, especially again in the rear yard. The problem with trees, again, what is our interest? And I love trees, but do we hold on to them to the bitter end until they really die? Is that our goal? Is that the best thing for our city? Because trees are going to die or they're going to damage. That is what happens the longer they live. That's just the truth of it. Come to my house and you can see what I'm talking about, where we've lived here over 25 years and slowly but surely problems from trees and roots. So, I don't know. Sometimes I think this is a better plan than the remaining trees. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Chang?
Yeah, I agree with the comments from Commissioner Brody. I think the tree that is being proposed, the remaining trees to be removed, they're not exceptional specimens of the tree, and they are very dirty and make it difficult to upkeep. I think the proposed plan is a better plan, and seeing that they want to replace and improve the landscaping with additional greenery and shrubbery and some ficus trees and grass would alleviate any concerns with it becoming all hardscape and becoming a dry, backyard. It's going to still be well landscaped. So I'd be in support of the appeal and to remove the trees.
Thank you. Vice Chair Boyle?
This is a real tough one for me. Simply because I don't in general support removing established trees, for lack of better words, in like prophylactically, right? Because they might cause, they might do damage. They might be a hazard. If that were the case, we would be, there's the potential of a lot of people wanting to take down trees based on what ifs. And so in that case, I do, I would support a continuance. I appreciate the landscape plan. It doesn't go as far as I would like, just because I understand that the property owner has concerns about too much shade. But I also think that what is included in the landscape plan does not have, now the unfortunate thing is I don't think it has enough shade. I, for one, am very big on shade canopies in town and the cooling effect that it has and the ability to mitigate the owner's utility costs. So that's why I'm very torn on this, because like, while I appreciate what the owner is trying to do, I also, I guess my biggest concern right now is just, again, the precedent it sends in terms of taking down trees that based on what ifs and what that opens us up to in terms of future applicants. So I'm still really pondering this one, and I don't have anything else to add or contribute.
Thank you. Commissioner Okazaki?
Everything else being equal, I'm supportive of the homeowner making improvements in his backyard. It is something that we I think, in my personal opinion, overregulate a backyard tree canopy. I know that we have rules in the city, but personally, I don't like those rules. But this homeowner sincerely wants to make improvements in his backyard, and it's not just removing trees, he's replacing them. And so he has a plan that makes sense for him. And, like I said, everything else being equal, I understand what everybody said. I'm supportive of the homeowner, and I would support the overturning the staff recommendation not to allow these trees to be cut. I would allow it to be cut and replace it with a replacement trees, the plan that he's submitted to the city.
Thank you. I'm also torn on this. I got some issues that concern me and want me to go with the continuance, but I also really feel for the homeowner, particularly on the issue of privacy. The trees are visible from the public right away. They're visible from both Lorraine Road and Alhambra Road. I saw them quite clearly. So I do think it is within the purview of this committee. I'm also really concerned with staff's, struggling to make that finding in order to find that there's a hazardous condition. And I don't want to go against staff lightly. But I must say that I struggle to try and understand myself what kind of consistency we have in making these kind of tree determinations. I just see no rhyme or reason in it. I agree with Commissioner Brody. I don't think a pittosporum is a particularly noble species of tree, and I don't know that it's worth protecting this late in its stage. But I see on my own street, beautiful olive trees in front lawns that they apply for a permit to remove it and get rid of it and put in some little dinky mealy tree from Home Depot, and it happens. And I don't understand how that happens. So, but the biggest concern I have, or the biggest weight that I feel, is really what the homeowner's concern about privacy. The way that lot is constructed and the way it abuts to the neighboring property on Alhambra, there's a grade difference between the properties. The property to the rear is a 2-story property. I would be very uncomfortable using my backyard in that situation, having someone be able to look out their window and, you know, pretty much see my entire rear yard. So that to me is probably the most persuasive argument. Otherwise, I'm not inclined to remove established trees. But do we have a motion to consider?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. I move to approve the appeal of the tree removal permit for 1470 Lorraine Road.
I'll second it.
Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Wright,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Brody,
Yes.
Vice Chair Boyle,
Yes.
Chair Dustin,
Yes.
motion carries.
That's not it for the agenda. We have one more item, the resolution. Oh yeah, we have two. The resolution of findings for design review, DRC 21-24 HP and 21-39 at 1705 Sharon Place.
One picky change, because this is me, of course, and I know you missed me doing this.
We welcome your thoughts, Commissioner Wright.
There should be a period at the end of the paragraph after section 3C. I told you it was picky, but let's get them perfect.
Any other suggested revisions? Do we have a motion?
I move to approve resolution number PCR 21-14. Do I have to add anything? Okay.
I know. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Wright,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Brody,
Yes.
Vice Chair Boyle, Chair Dustin,
Yes.
motion carried.
And then the last item on the agenda, I apologize to my fellow commissioners for dragging this meeting out longer, but I wanted to find out what the people who on the commission who attended the Commissioners Academy, what your experiences were with that and what you thought of it. And did you have any suggestions for the staff or for the city council as a result of attending that? And I found out that we really can't have that kind of a discussion if it's not agendized on the meeting. I thought we could just sort of casually discuss it after a meeting, but apparently we can't. So anyway, I was just curious, does anybody have anything they wanted to share? I found the training extremely valuable and helpful. Who attended? I'm just curious. Yeah.
Ed.
Now,
The only reason why we couldn't have taped it and then made it available to people who couldn't attend at the time it was scheduled.
it actually was
Yeah.
available, and it might still be. All the sessions were recorded. I watched most of them live, but a couple of them I couldn't attend live, and I watched them after the fact.
I watched them all recorded.
Huh?
I watched all of them as recordings, you know, after the fact. I couldn't attend any of them live.
Oh, okay.
But I do, I mean, I wrote a few notes while I was doing it. I obviously didn't expect to be talking to everybody. I didn't have the same experience you did, Chair. In fact, I hesitate to say this because it sounds like, what's the word? Arrogant, that's the word. And I told
I think I know what you're going to say.
I knew like 98% of it. That was shocking to me, quite frankly. I've been retired a long time. It was shocking because A, I thought more things would have changed, and B, that I remembered so much. But I did learn, there's an environmental justice element to the general plan. I did not know that. It's not shocking to me, but that was something I learned. Had we not had that excellent presentation on RHNA right before I listened to all these, I might have learned a little bit more, because of course they talked a lot about RHNA. They talked about how we could use church sites for RHNA. I don't know that we talked about that. They talked about certain things we could do with commercial properties. They had a lot of good ideas for commercial properties. We're not a big commercial city. They talked about adaptive reuse. And I don't know that we've ever talked about that in our city. That was a very big deal in the city of LA, very successful. Adaptive reuse meaning you take commercial properties and you reuse them into residential. It was very big.
In all of downtown Los Angeles, that was a
very big
ordinance.
Yeah, and really what happened was they transformed all these commercial properties into lofts, and they had this whole area in downtown LA for artists and all that. It was very successful ordinance. They talked about work from home policies, and I thought about that for our city. Well, I mean, we have what do we call it? A home occupation ordinance here. I think we could ask our staff, but I think that probably covers that. They talked about using rooftops. You could see my mind was wandering through all the things that that I heard here. I thought their discussions on CEQA were directed more towards probably staff than for us, even though we certainly know about CEQA. Same I would say about their findings. A good discussion on findings, more for staff again, I think, than for us. And of course, staff was welcome to these to these sessions. For me, I liked the best, and I'd like to know what you think about this, Chair. My favorite session, again, I have to kind of laugh, was the one on how to run a planning commission meeting. But of course, that's because I totally identified with City Attorney Hogan, and I was answering all the questions before she did. So there you go. That was just my bias. But I thought that was actually a lot of good information. And then lastly, the only thing I would say, all of this just brought to me the notion of we have some mandatory trainings that we haven't had as a commission, and we need to have. I think ethics, maybe harassment, I'm not sure. So I would say to staff, we need to get going on our mandatory training. Okay, that's
it. Anyone else have experiences to share? No?
You're amazing. All the stuff that you remember.
Thank you.
Now, as a package to the academy, we were given the opportunity for that ethics training and the sexual harassment.
Yeah,
training,
and I mentioned that to our director today, and wondering if more of us should do that.
I took that training too.
Sexual harassment training.
Or if our city clerk is going to have one for all of us. So that's something that we can ask the director. And maybe he has an answer, maybe he doesn't, I don't know, of whether we're going to be given that training, as all as one, or if we should try to take advantage of the ones in this training pack.
Yeah, I'll talk to the city clerk about the training, but likely what we'll do is we'll send you a link to have you guys on your own take a class. It's a 2-hour class in that specific sense, and just forward to us your certificates that you obtain thereafter, and that would satisfy the requirements. But I'll get working on that with the city clerk and make sure that she lets you take advantage of those classes.
I had a question for staff that sort of came out of my when they were talking about findings at this academy. How well are we doing in terms of providing you the meat that you need? I know a lot of times you come up with findings, especially for the conditional use permits, prior to the meeting, and you have them written up for us. But like in particular, I was thinking of like more of the design review stuff. When we're making comments, are we generally doing a good job of giving you stuff that you can hang your hat on when you're writing up findings, or are we giving you mush that you struggle to have to make something meaningful out of?
Well, well, first of all, I'll be brief with this because I think we're getting off the topic, unless you disagree. But in general, I would say that the findings that we received back from the commission are point on, right on with what we need and what we look for. It's how we generate the resolutions that you act on at every meetings. We utilized the findings that you, as a planning commission, put together, and we summarized or memorialized them in these resolutions. And so they've been, you've been very helpful. You've been on point with the findings. But, you know, certainly, you know, the training that we had set up for the planning commission, you know, I'm glad that there was a lesson on findings, because I think that those are the most critical components of any decision making, whether it's an approval or denial of a project. And so certainly take those guides of that Planning Academy training with respect to findings and utilize them, even utilize them in a form of conditions of approval. So, you know, very good class. And I would say that A+ is what I would say the Planning Commission is receiving. So keep up the good work, of course.
All right, well, that's all I had. I just kind of was curious what people's experience were with. So, so I guess with that, we'll adjourn till August.
Could I raise one more thing, Chair?
Absolutely.
I'm sorry. I know you were glad when I was gone. I know it. Okay, I was wondering about if you, Chair, would be interested in scheduling or attempting to schedule, requesting to schedule a meeting with the City Council, because we usually every year, as you know, have a joint meeting with them where we can discuss issues that that concern us and give the City Council the attention, let them know.
Yeah, I would agree. I very much think that's a useful meeting. I don't know what happened that it wasn't scheduled for this year. I have vague memories that we had one originally when the schedule of meetings came out at the beginning of the year at City Council. They published something, but then it sort of went away. I'm not really sure. I think they had to usurp another group in for us or something. I'm not sure. So I don't know. Is that how do we formally request that?
And Chair, you don't have to formally request it. I will bring it up to the city clerk. I know we have a schedule that we place these joint meetings on. I want to say that we had the joint meeting last year around this time. And so now, you know, you don't have to do anything as far as a motion. I will bring it up to the appropriate staff to make sure we get that on the schedule.
Thank you. So with that, we'll adjourn. Are we in agreement? Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.